Greetings, everyone. Today is Friday, November 27th, and welcome to today's Heritage Month program. All of the members of the Germantown Friends School community, I am very, very happy to introduce a amazing and wonderful member of the Nanticoke Lenape Tribal Nation, Trinity Norwood. She's with us today. But let me first introduce myself. My name is Dr. Angela Campbell, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and host of today's exciting program with Trinity Norwood. So welcome, Trinity.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It is November. It is Native American Heritage Month. There's such a need for us to recognize Indigenous peoples and nations and to recognize the great contributions, the historical legacy, and what's happening today with various Indigenous peoples, and to recognize the social justice issues that are occurring across the United States, what's going on with sovereignty issues, and how do we maintain and uphold the human dignity of the First Peoples of these lands. And so we will get started. First, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about yourself. I heard and read some things about you as an activist, a cultural artist, a dancer, and a contributor of preserving the history and culture of the Lenni Lenape. So I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay, well, I am a citizen of the Nanticoke Lenape Tribal Nation. Our headquarters are in South Jersey, in Bridgeton, New Jersey. I am a youth group leader. I volunteer with our youth group, and I run our royalty program. I do presentations like this in schools. Oh, wow, I guess maybe for the past 10 years, I've been doing presentations like this in schools where I share my culture and the history of my people, to give young people a interactive piece of Native culture. Unfortunately, a lot of Native culture is talked about in the past tense, and it kind of gives us this sense that we are a distant piece of history. So I started to present and share my culture so that people could see us as, fully present people, living today and doing totally normal things like going to work and driving cars.
Very good. That's important that we look at the living history and the life and culture that's going on today. And yesterday, as we all know, was Thanksgiving. And I was curious about, so many Americans celebrate Thanksgiving. And for many of us, it is always a day that brings a little bit of controversy and struggle to surround the historical origins of the day, but also loving that moment with family and being able to share the gratitude that we have for one another. So I'm curious about your relationship to that particular holiday.
Well, I have a complicated relationship with how it is celebrated today. But I always tell people when they ask, it is a Native principle or tradition across tribes all over the nation that we value our families and our relations. So I think that we are, in a sense, exercising and participating in a Native tradition by people getting together and loving their family and valuing their family. But we can still celebrate and be happy with our family and be true to the history of what the day actually is. And that's really the core issue. It isn't the, celebrating with your family, eating and having a good time. It is the erasure of the actual history of the day. So there's a way to recognize the history and still enjoy your time with your family. For my family, it makes our time together even more special because we remember the lives that were lost, that didn't get to be with their families. Women and children, men, women, and children lost their lives on the first Thanksgiving. So we take time to remember those people and to pray for their tribal communities, that they heal from the genocide and the suffering. And then we also take that time to eat and value each other and care about each other. And I think that's a good way to celebrate the day, or to, I guess the better term would be to memorialize the day. You know, people get very touchy about Thanksgiving because the true Thanksgiving was such a horrific event. But if you look at many of our holidays in reality, they are memorializing difficult things. You know, we have cookouts on Memorial Day, but we are remembering, our fallen soldiers. So there are plenty of holidays where we remember as opposed to just celebrate, and we can turn Thanksgiving into that.
Wonderful. I love the focus on memorializing, celebrating, and educating. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, what inspired your interest in um, the Lenape people? What's your relationship to your own awakening of consciousness about your identity?
That is a great question. I don't get that question too often. Well, my father worked very hard for our tribal citizenship when I was a little girl. And there is for all tribes, there is a citizenship process, excuse me, where you do your history and do your research, and trace your ancestry back to that tribe, whether it's a core set of names, which is how our tribal community does it, to be able to receive your citizenship from tribal community, and to be able to vote in elections and things like that. So we received our citizenship, I probably was in about middle school. And it was exciting for me, but it really wasn't real for me. To me, I had a card. I was still, hanging out with my family and having a good old time. I will say it wasn't until I got to high school where I was in several situations where people denied me my own ancestry when I said that I was Native, because I didn't fit a stereotype that they were looking for. That I decided that, it is important that I speak up on this issue, because I didn't want younger people to have to do the same things that I had to do in school, which was, constantly debating even my own teachers on my history. My little brother was in a class in middle school where his teacher told him in front of fellow students that there was no way he could be Native because he didn't fit this stereotype she was looking for. So it was things like that that happened as I was in high school that gave me a passion to speak out and share my culture, and become a bit of an activist.
Wonderful. And I just want to acknowledge that in so many different cultural communities, this tension between choosing identity, fitting stereotypes is really something to challenge and dismantle. And I hope that the young people and all the members at GFS feel empowered to do that research, to learn about yourselves, and to feel pride in who you are. So thank you,
Yeah.
community.
Oh, of course, and feel pride in every part of who you are. We are pushed into boxes so much in life, and nobody is just one thing. And you can do your research, and you can be proud of all aspects of your heritage, even the heritage that you might only know a little bit about or just learning about. It's still part of who you are.
That's good. You're inspiring me. As I shared with you earlier, my grandmother is from Indian Woods, North Carolina, and often shared with us that she was part Cherokee Indian, and my father's people from Valdosta, Georgia, and the Seminole Nations, and being Black, being an African American woman, and being proud and learning to develop pride in being Black and being an African American, oftentimes I also felt, and many people have felt that tension to just choose a side, any side, and just stick there and not acknowledge the other dimensions of our heritages. So I hope that this interview and what we do at GFS allows people the freedom to be who they are and to acknowledge it. It's so much to acknowledge, and I'd like to return more to what should we know about the Nanticoke Lenape people in terms of historical landmarks and contributions, anything about language, coming all the way up to today. What would you like us to know?
Oh, I would need days in order to give you all that information.
Three things, maybe
Three
four to
things.
five things
Okay.
that you should know about the Lenni Lenape.
Okay. Well, I would say firstly that, we are the indigenous people to this area. These are our ancestral lands. The Lenape people, before the Europeans came, we lived in what is now Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and even the lower part of New York. We were matriarchal people. So our women were in charge and life was easy. And our women, actually our female elders, were the final decision when we went to war. That's how important the decision of women are. And that is a tradition that we still practice today. Women as life bearers are considered sacred in our community. We were one of the first tribal nations to resist European encroachment on our tribal lands. And actually, our Nanticoke cousins to the south of us always like to joke. They have a historical story where they say, we met John Smith first before he went down to Virginia, and we tried to poison him. We were fierce warriors and also strong diplomats historically. Our people would be contacted to come out and resolve issues between other tribal nations. We are we are called the grandfathers by other tribal communities because we're one of the oldest tribal communities. Many of the Eastern Algonquian speaking nations here on the coast came from or interrelated with the Lenape people. It is very common to find in history books that it says that, all Native people here on the East Coast moved out to reservations, but, me being here is a testament against that. The Lenape people stayed here. We stayed here in secret. We had to hide in plain sight in order to be able to stay on our ancestral lands. And that was very important to us. We do have Lenape people who were forced out west. We have reservations in Oklahoma. There's a reservation in Canada, as well as, I believe it's Wisconsin, where there are other Lenape people. And the people who stayed here were tasked with being the keepers of the land. And we still all interact regularly. Actually, every 3 years, we have a big Lenape gathering where people from all over the country come and we get to share in our traditions and our ceremonies. In more modern times, we have our sovereign nation in New Jersey, and we have two Lenape communities up in North Jersey that we are interrelated with, and a Lenape community and a Nanticoke community down in Delaware. And we are all interrelated and we all work together. And we all have our own separate sovereign tribal governments.
Wonderful. And do you speak any other languages? Is anyone preserving the indigenous language? Could you speak to that?
Sure. There is a language. Lenape is the language. I don't speak it. I'm no good. I have tried many times to learn, but languages just don't come to me quite as easy. We do have language classes. There was a long time in American history where Native people were not allowed to speak their language. And most of the Lenape people, as well as many other tribes, practice an oral tradition. So we didn't write things down. We didn't have a dictionary to hold on to keep our language. So in, I want to say the 1990s, there was a big push for, in our tribal community, to record as much as we could from the final 2 or 3 Lenape speakers. And so our language was preserved through tapes. And they took about 10 years, but they were able to piece together a dictionary. And now we have language classes. And when we have our tribal summer camp for our young people, we teach them part of the language. So we have a whole generation that is growing up and is incorporating Lenape words into their everyday life, which is something that is really exciting to me because, I grew up at the time where they were still working to piece together a dictionary. So to see that kind of progress is so exciting to me.
That's extraordinary. So much about a people culturally is embedded in language. The power to
Absolutely.
define oneself, the power to define reality, to define vision comes
Hmm.
from language. And so I'm so happy to hear that. That's extraordinary. Are there any particular stories that you enjoy sharing with people to help people to recognize and to understand a little bit more about the Nanticoke and Lenni Lenape people?
That is a good question. Um, well, historically, I give people context about the Lenape people by sharing actually our history with the Quakers. We have a long-standing history with the Quakers, going all the way back to William Penn. We had a positive relationship with William Penn, and actually we signed a treaty at Shakamaxon with him, which is modern-day Penn Treaty Park in Philadelphia. And even to this day, we actually still go there once a year and have just a small ceremony where we remember the treaty and our great relationship that we have with the Quaker community. We still work with the Quaker community in Philadelphia, as well as the Quaker community is a little bit closer to home down in South Jersey. So that sharing that story always helps people get a context into how old our traditions are. The belt that was used during that treaty has been circulated through museums and has been recreated and honored throughout the years. The story is also a great example of how important keeping treaties and traditions alive are for the Lenape people. That was, oh gosh, I can't think of the exact number now, but that was so many years ago, and it is something that we still are so very proud of, and continue to honor today. Because when someone does right by you, especially for Indigenous people who have not been done right so many times, it is important to remember and memorialize that person and experience.
Um, and I know there's some students that shared some information about that historical legacy and more information about those treaties and the relationship between the Lenni Lenape and the Quakers. Are there some resources? I know we'll share some additional resources with our school community, but if there's anything else you'd like to share that we should remember, please just interject that in the course of our interview.
Sure.
So when we think about the Lenni Lenape and the significance of sovereignty, can you share with us a little bit about what does it mean to be a sovereign nation within a nation?
Oh, sure. Being a sovereign nation means that we are a completely separate government inside the United States. Every tribal nation has their own government structure, has their own laws, and even if you go further out west, some of the reservation communities even have their own police forces and things of that nature. it is a country inside a country. I always make the example, it would be like if New Jersey or Pennsylvania suddenly decided they were their own country inside the US. So as a sovereign nation, or as a member of a tribal sovereign nation, I have a tribal card, which kind of serves as my native social security card. And it is like having dual citizenship. I have my ID card and I have my citizenship with my tribe. And then I am also a full American citizen. I have I was born in the United States. I have my birth certificate and things of that nature. So it is important that tribes are considered and recognized as sovereign nations because that's what we are. We're not a group of enthusiasts that just get together or a historical society. We are the governments that were here before the United States had a government of their own. We've always had a government structure, and that is what makes a tribe a tribe. It is a group of interrelated peoples who have worked under a government structure of some sort continuously, consistently throughout history.
Wonderful. You mentioned some of the benefits of citizenship with the Lenape and Nanticoke Nation. What are some other benefits for you? What does it mean and how has it served you, benefited you to become a member?
It is a sense of pride because I know that it is a privilege. I recognize my privilege of being able to be a citizen because there are many people who have Indigenous heritage who possibly can't trace it back. And then there are also many people who are related to tribal communities, but possibly do not qualify for citizenship. So I recognize it as a privilege, and I'm very proud of being able to trace my heritage and contribute to my community as a citizen.
Wonderful. With much privilege also comes responsibility. So are there certain things that you have to do to maintain your citizenship?
Well, you receive your citizenship and that is yours to have. Now, we do have qualifications or requirements if you are going to be a voting member in our tribal community. So we have elections, just like we do in the US, for all of our government positions. So in order to ensure that you are a member in good standing and can vote at elections, you're required to meet participate in at least 6 tribal meetings throughout the year. And our tribal meetings are kind of like town hall meetings where we go over what's going on in our community. We go over any laws or committees that are making changes or anything like that. We are a structured government. And that we have our meetings and those keep our community involved in what's going on, and also give our people space to ask for help for things, and or bring ideas to the tribe for new community efforts.
Excellent. I recall reading that some of the features of our democracy and growing, evolving republic, some of the ideas in our founding documents in the United States, there was an influence from Indigenous peoples on the formation of democratic government. I don't know if there's anything about that you'd like to speak to, but just wanted to also lift up and acknowledge that influence and the contribution.
Yes, absolutely. When Europeans came to the US and they saw most tribes had a chief that was typically, not always, passed down, through heritage. they assumed that we had a system very much to what was in Europe, where we have kings and queens of that nature. But that is not traditional for Lenape people or most tribal communities here on the East Coast. We do have, the Lenape people did traditionally have a chief that was passed down from generation through a family line, but we had a council of elders that would assist in decision making. We would have meetings where, you know, tribal people from the tribal community could voice their opinions. We were a democracy. Our decisions were made by, you know, I talked about our elder women making the final decision for whether we could go to war back in the day. So it was not a dictatorship. We always worked in a democratic way, and we continue that practice today.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Very rich. So I have two more areas that I'd love for you to speak to. One is powwows. What are they? What role do they play? And what's the role of dance and spirituality?
Oh, sure. So powwows are a intertribal event. They are typically public, and I think they are one of the greatest tools our community utilizes to share our culture. They have been all over the country. Different tribes host powwows, different organizations host powwows. And they are, I like to say, kind of like a native twist on a carnival. There's lots of dancing, there's lots of food, there's educational programming, there's vendors where you can buy things from. So you can really get a well-rounded view of what that community, that tribal community is like, from the crafters that come from all over not only the United States, but also South America. You get to, experience and see our traditional crafts. You get to see and taste our traditional foods. And then you also get the piece of the dancing where you can watch and even sometimes participate in some of our dancing. Dancing is very important for not only the Lenape people, but I would say indigenous people all over both North and South America, because it is one of our greatest expressions. A lot of Native communities are heavily influenced by gifting and showing appreciation through physical acts, as opposed to just saying it. So oftentimes you'll be at a powwow and someone will request a special dance to say thank you to someone. Our dances are tied to our spirituality because they are a sign of gratitude to the Creator. Many of our traditional dances, that is the foundation of them. They're an expression to the Creator to say thank you for our lives. We have some dances that are so ceremonial you have to ask permission to do. Our women's jingle dress dance is a healing dance, and it is tradition that a woman has to ask the ceremonial leader of their community if they are prepared to take on that responsibility of being a healer through that dance. So no matter what tribal community you go to, dance is deeply rooted and very spiritual. Different tribal communities have different ceremonial dances, but the great thing about a powwow is the dance styles that are there are what I call pan-Indian. So people from all different tribes practice these dances. And so it is a way that, we can share our culture with people outside of the Native community, but we also get to share with each other, even though we have different tribal backgrounds. Our tribe has our powwow. It's the second weekend in June. Unfortunately, we didn't have it this year due to the pandemic, but typically it's the second weekend in June at the Salem County Fairgrounds in South Jersey. And it's a public event. It's lots of singing, lots of dancing, and you'll see me there every year face painting, and all are welcome.
Wonderful. You also dance?
I do. I will say I'm a little bit more retired now. I go out now for my nephew. I'll walk him around a few times, but I used to dance competitively at powwows when I was younger.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. You mentioned the pandemic and what happened, and I'm thinking about, contemporary issues and the pandemic and racial justice, especially for African Americans that we saw this summer. Um, what is the connection do you see between what's going on today and how it's impacting the Lenni Lenape?
Well, we have been heavily impacted by the pandemic, but we are very blessed to, in comparison to many other tribal nations, not have it too bad. The Navajo Nation has been ravished by the pandemic, terribly so, and really did not receive the resources that they were guaranteed by our government. But our community, because we are not a reservation, there are no reservations in New Jersey or Pennsylvania. Keeping everyone in wasn't too difficult. I would say the way we struggled the most was being able to figure out how to stay connected. Our elders are not computer people, so the disconnection was very difficult for a lot of our tribal members, and a lot of our elders, depended heavily on our feeding ministries to provide for themselves. So we definitely had to work quickly to find creative ways to take care of our elders. But we were also, honored with gifts from people who made masks for our elders and things of that nature. And, it was such a blessing to our community. A lot of people think that when I say, support your Native community, it has to be some sort of monetary support, but there are plenty of things you can do. A young lady just felt moved to make masks. She made 50 masks and just donated them. And they made all the difference in the world for our elders, who needed masks, especially, we remember at the beginning of the pandemic, it was difficult to find them. And so, we also were able to create that bond with this young lady, and we were so honored by her gift.
That is wonderful. You have to take care of the elders.
Yes.
It's critical, very important. What has the relationship been like between the Lenni Lenape and African Americans?
Well, historically, we did a lot of intermarrying when slaves from down south moved further up north. There was a lot of intermarrying that took place with the Lenape people. We have always had a united history with the African community down in the Bridgeton area. And we have quite a few people who have been adopted into our community, who are of African American descent.
Very exciting. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the GFS community? You've given us so much. It's been so rich. And I am abundantly grateful to you, Trinity. But is there any closing thoughts that you have?
I guess my closing thought would be what I kind of opened with is that, we are still here. We are a alive and vibrant community, and we are totally normal people. There's a lot of otherness that is associated with Indigenous people. And that's not who we are. I go to work, I drive my car, I'm home, I got a dog upstairs. We are just also attached to a culture that is even older than the country we live in. And it is what grounds us. And, we are here to share our culture, and also bring our culture back to the forefront. There's a big movement for our community, the US at large, to get back to traditional Native principles and, start being better stewards over the time we have here on Earth and the Earth itself. You know, that is something that's very important for us, because we have to make sure that we leave this land better than we had it for our future generations. And you know, I always like to leave people by saying, you know, we're not hundreds of miles away in this distant world. We are right here, right now, and we're looking for allies to help push our communities forward, as well as, you know, push some of these campaigns for a better world forward. And you can find where you can connect and become an ally to our community.
Thank you so much, Trinity Norwood. I honor you, bless you. I thank you and all of your ancestors, part of the Nanticoke, Lenni Lenape, and all of your other ancestors, all of our Indigenous ancestors, all of you that are watching the video. Thank you for sharing this time with us. And always remember the importance of celebrating and educating ourselves on Native American Heritage Month. Thank you, Trinity.
Thank you, Wanishi.